Good morning.
Morning, Professor.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Boy, Zoom's been making me work hard, extra hard on finals week of all things. Do any of you use sign in with Gmail? Sign in with your Google account? You do?
I think I signed in with my Google account. I'm not sure.
You
It
know,
makes me register every time I come in.
It's interesting because I've done that from the beginning, all the way back since March when I started Zooming. But it could be a problem just for hosts. But this week suddenly, someone hosting the Zoom meeting with the Google account, it tells you to sign in again every time you click it. Sign in again, sign in again. It's this weird loop, totally maddening. Yesterday, I had no idea how I got into the meeting, and I discovered people all over the place are having the same problem. There's lots of logging in, but I haven't noticed whether they're all hosts or not. I think they are. Just today, I figured out a workaround, and it took me the last half hour. Luckily, I just literally logged in only a couple minutes ago. I would, really during finals week, but it worked. So why should I complain? All right, everybody. So, I'm pretty sure everybody's clear on what we're going to do. I do want to go right to the handout and say a few words to everybody about wrapping stuff up and where we're at, what we need for the last couple of days. So I'm going to screen share right now. Yeah, John.
I turned on Adobe Animate this morning, and they said my license expires next week.
Really? So that was the original expiration date, but Adobe told, listen, we'll have to search online. I got a letter from the head of our department, who's sharp, super sharp guy, saying that you have your Adobe subscription into August. So if you got that notice, I'm wondering if on the last day it'll recommend some kind of step to log back in. I really don't know much about it. And John, you're pretty savvy about all this stuff, so you might have to do a little searching online to see what others have said about the same situation. I wish I had more for you. So I'm going to screen share right now. And again, I'm going right to the desktop option. And here we are. And let me just move some stuff around. All right. So let's go over a couple of things because we have very little time to manage anything needing management. Thursday is our last day. So today, tomorrow, and then one last day. So that's all that there is, right? And I can't accept work after July 4th, which is this Saturday, because my grades, to be honest with you, my grades are supposed to go in on Saturday, but I stretched everything a little bit for everybody, and I won't be able to stretch it any further, except in the most extreme situations. Just for the record, for anyone in this particular group who may need to hear this, or anyone on YouTube watching this later today, I'm not too big on giving incompletes. I got 2 requests for incompletes, and I expect today to review those 2 situations in detail to decide whether or not I could offer them. In all honesty, I've never given an incomplete in my entire career, but so if anyone's going to need that, you better let me know right away so that I could look into it. I'm not going to promise one way or the other without looking into individual cases. Enough said about that. So for everybody else, and listen, I got to tell you something. I'm not going to peg out individuals, but there's some of you here who are super duper diligent, but kind of blew one project. So please look at Blackboard today. And if you haven't looked at Blackboard even once yet, you're taking college on faith alone, which is not a good idea, because even if you did all your work, what if you wrote my email address with 1 letter wrong and I never got it? You got a 0 without knowing it. You have to check Blackboard. That's your responsibility. So please be sure. Anything could happen. Marissa, do you have something to say? Your little box lit up.
Oh no, I thought I was still muted. Hold on.
No. So anyway, I do want to say to everybody, please do check Blackboard today. You don't have any time to delay. See if you owe me anything, right? Some of you are, A students who should get an A, but aren't going to get it because project 4 right now would look easy to anybody in here. So if you blew project 4, for example, I'm still accepting it. How weird is that? I wouldn't do that if this was the fall, but since this whole class only took a month, I'm accepting everything, you know? So the class 4 assignment was updated yesterday, right? So that's how I know that a couple people here either not done it or blew it in some way. You should review it. The midterm assignment, I should really not accept at all. And I do believe everyone who's serious about this class has taken it, but you should see. And again, that's the 29th. Again, I mean to say I upgraded it. In other words, I reviewed to see if there were any late ones just yesterday. The video assignment was due last Thursday, right? So that means it's late, but I graded it yesterday, and I was a little disappointed to see 7 people didn't hand it in. And I'm really not wagging my finger at anybody. This class is hard, you know, really. I mean, you guys are taking it in what I consider the best, in a weird way, the best way to take it, because most of you, I believe most of you are only taking one class right now in the summer. I know some of you are taking more than one. But even with just the 4 projects, the class is kind of exhausting, you know. 3 out of the 4 are kind of large. So please check today. If you have any doubts, like, oh no, I did send you that work, don't just send me an email asking about it. Submit it again and send me an email to tell me you did that. You know, why delay steps, you know? So again, please do check. Now, the animation assignment, right, is due on Saturday. So this really has to be done to your best advantage because there's not going to be a chance for redos, right? So the details are being announced today. Today I'm going to devote myself to it. I want to say something though, quickly. I have every interest in creating as many opportunities for success as I can within reason. You know, so I'm accepting everything late, but not ultra late. Saturday's the deadline, right? If there's some disaster struck, a radical event in your family, I'm going to look at your case individually. I know one person in the class at least has had that kind of circumstance. But in general, don't expect anything beyond a very generous arrangement to begin with. Saturday. All right, enough said. So, you know, Jonathan was saying that when he logged in today, it warned him that he's got about a week left, which is what they had told us all along. And then recently they just updated to extend them to August 24th. So why he's still getting that warning, I don't really know, but I do believe he's going to figure out how to turn that around because they did announce it, as far as I've been told by my reliable boss. You know? All right, so there you go. Of course, the videos are online. All right, I want to move forward, and I want to show you something before we, you know, go too far. So you might notice that these objects. I wonder why is that indented? I got to fix that. These blue items here are background stuff. So this is classic tweening concepts, and I'm going to give it a very short review, maybe a 10-minute review. Why? If I separate the concepts from kinetic typography, right? So you understand why you're taking the steps very clearly. Why am I creating a symbol? You know, why do I have to go to the timeline to turn on my classic tween? It will help you understand what choices you have for the final project. So I am going to go over these concepts rather quickly with a quick demonstration, but then I'm going to go into detail about the same ideas, but just directly relates to the final project. So before I even do that, let's take a peek forward for a minute, right? I've divided my handout regarding the final project into final project part 1, final project part 2. Because part 1 is what you have to think and prepare before you could actually do the project. Part 2 is detailed steps. So these are pretty much the same steps as yesterday's handout, but slightly more detailed, you know. So let's back up for a minute. Well, I do recommend you make a folder for today to save stuff in because you're going to want to know where your FLA is, and when you export your GIF, where the GIF is, and if you choose to export a SWIF, where the SWIF is. So I would make a folder just for today, so all that stuff could be easy to find, right? That's on you. You know, a lot of you guys are very good with computers. You might have your own way of doing things. I'm all right with that. The name of your FLA for the final should be what you're seeing on my screen, right? MMP100 final, first name, last name, .FLA. Did not improvise on the name. Now, Lorenzo, I want to say something to you, even though usually I address private issues, you know, via email, etc. But you might recall yesterday, he had the weirdest thing going. You're doing everything right, but just on export, his letters scrambled. Very odd. The guy tried everything I could possibly think of. So Lorenzo, in your case only, literally your case only, right? You're going to send me the FLA itself for the final, right?
Okay.
Now, the reason I'm not going to let other people do that is I will not see the correct fonts, right? And I don't have time to load the correct fonts. So Lorenzo, if you know about fonts, since you're on a Mac, see if you could find the fonts you're going to use and send them to me also.
Okay.
So you'll send me a folder with your FLA in it, in your case, and the fonts if you can, right? So that's an emergency tactic on my part, right? No one else had any trouble. So I want to be a little clearer. Let me just get this where I could see everybody. What I want most is just your GIF. That's what I really want, just the GIF, right? Just the .gif that you export when you're done. I don't want the authoring file, which is that original, the FLA. Again, I don't have your fonts, and there's 20-something people in this class. So what I'm going to see is ruined files, right? Utterly ruined, unless you send me exported files. And even if you sent me the fonts, I don't have that kind of time. And, you know, I'm helping out Lorenzo. He's got an unusual situation, and the guy works crazy hard. And anyone else has a similar situation, you got to let me know. I'll work with you. But everybody else, please send me a GIF. You might wonder why it says here, FLA and the GIF, or SWIF in parentheses. There's again a backup, because we don't have time to play with. If your GIF flat out does not behave, you're going to publish a SWIF instead. Remember Command Return or Control Enter, right? So that just shows you the preview we've been calling it, but it's a SWIF. And you can send me that. But I don't expect anyone to have a problem. You know, really, other than the one we already discussed, no one's had a problem making GIFs. So set your mind on sending me a GIF, right? Backup options, a SWIF. Last resort, talk to me. And I'll talk about how you could use the FLA to satisfy the final. I hope that's all clear enough. Again, if you haven't had problems yet, then don't worry about it. Prepare to send me a GIF, that's all. I want you to look at these 4 choices. Now, yesterday we did Peace is Always Beautiful, right? We did that together as a warm-up. So I've nicknamed this the Peace Project, right? Let me zoom in a bit, you might say. So I got 4 quotes, each includes the author, and I do want you to include the author. Yesterday it was Walt Whitman. So you notice number 1 says, peace is its own reward. A beautiful quote by a beautiful person, Mahatma Gandhi, right up there with Martin Luther King. Peace is its own reward. It's very short. I want to come back and talk about this one. The Dalai Lama said, do not let the behavior of others destroy your inner peace. Another beautiful thing. Look, guys, we're just getting off topic for a minute. Asian philosophy saved my life. You know, I don't mind being blunt to you because I know creative people often have certain issues. I probably would have been diagnosed as severely depressed. You know, had a really, really difficult childhood. Somehow philosophies, both Hindu and Buddhist, gave me what I needed. I've been meditating every single day for over 13 years. But even when I was young, just reading this stuff helped. If anyone's having depression issues and medication isn't working for you, or psychiatry is not working for you, if you've always wanted to pursue a meditation practice, you can send me an email. I'll recommend a couple books to you. Saved my life in indirect ways, my family. Now I get up, I'm pretty positive, even in a pandemic. Anyway, these are some of my heroes. All right. I would gladly recommend books on these topics if anyone has the need of that. Marvin Gaye, famous Motown musician, said, if you cannot find peace within yourself, you'll never find it anywhere else. Now, you notice how they get longer? I did that purposely. Here's the last one. It isn't enough to talk about peace. One must believe in it. And it isn't enough to believe in it. One must work at it. Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, the thing I want to point out is, I want you guys to think with me. You know, I got to say something about this class that I'm absolutely excited by. When I was looking at the videos, I realized how much people heard me when I was talking about concept. You know, sometimes I have classes, they only want techniques. You know, it's like teaching color theory and they just want to know how to mix the paint. They don't want to know meaning of color. But this one, when I was talking about Guatemala, past, future, and what that means and all of that, it really showed in the videos. I was utterly delighted that people get that. You can't really do anything creative. You can't build the perfect chair without sitting in hundreds of chairs to know what's the difference. You know, and that's about insight. That's not about knowing how to use tools in the woodshop. So I want to say some concept things to you about working with typography in animation. All right. First off, even in the short one, peace is its own reward. Is its are not important words. You know, is its. You can't delete them, but they're not important. So I'd want to stress the word peace. And I definitely want to stress the word reward. Own, but is it's definitely not. Do you remember how yesterday when we did peace is always beautiful? I chose to make is always one unit and it slid in by itself because I've seen students do is always, or even worse, the letter I, the letter S, A, L, W, Y. There's no drama to that. It just takes patience to even watch and a really long time to look at. So I use the term text block a lot. Sometimes I mean one word. That block could fade in, it could slide in, it could do both, it could change colors. Peace. Is its, I would make one text block. You know, the choices are yours, however. All right, do not let the behavior of others destroy your inner peace. Well, do not let is a complete thought, isn't it? Do not let. And then, all right, what? What shouldn't I let? That might make a nice block, right? The behavior of others, that would be a big block, so I don't know. Maybe two, the behavior of others. Now I think about it, I think that would work very well. The behavior of others destroys a powerful word. I might make that big. You see where I'm headed with this? Because the first step yesterday is going to be the first step today, where you lay out the way the animation is going to look at the end. I know it's a weird first step. It's like writing the last chapter of a book. But you can't animate unless you know what it's going to look like when it behaves like a poster at the end. Right? So we're going to start there. Marvin Gaye's quote follows the same rules. And we're not going to agree, and we don't even have to agree on what should be a block. Whether really if, I don't know, maybe. But there's a lot of words. You know, you're going to definitely have to figure out how to lay it out. I want to say something about Eleanor Roosevelt's. Now, this would be really challenging. And I'm just going to be blunt to everybody here, right? I'm not asking people to do more than you can handle. Not at all. I want people who are feeling very fluid at this to have a nice challenge available. And I want people who don't feel confident yet to be able to choose something simple. You can get an A with any of these, right? It's possible with any of them. But about Eleanor's, if I was really going to do this for a client, I wouldn't have it all come on one page anyway. I'd probably do one sentence at a time. It isn't enough to talk about peace. Could be like, it isn't enough to talk about peace. And then I might have the whole thing fade out and do a whole section for almost like scenes in a movie. And then do a whole scene for one must believe in it. One must believe in it, you know. And then, so that would be a whole different technique really than I taught in this class. I had one or two students actually choose to do that on their own. It was very thoughtful. Do you remember yesterday? You guys give me a second. I want to just show you something one more time. We saw it yesterday, so I'm not going to spend long on it. YouTube's got so many great examples, but since we talked about one yesterday, I want to use it. Kinetic type is the search, where you can see all the cool stuff. This student won an award, and we saw it yesterday. I'm only going to look at it, but listen to my comment. Not about the ad, however. Okay. So give this a moment. That's pretty fancy.
Curiosity is a muscle. Use it or lose it. It's something that we consciously have to nurture in ourselves, in our families, classrooms, at work.
Now, my point is, he's not collecting words on the screen, right? He's collecting phrases that he thinks are important, and he's letting them go as he moves the conversation forward. If you ever tried kinetic type in an entire speech, you'd have no choice but to do it that way. So I want to tell you what I have in mind. I'm going to vote for doing like we did yesterday, keeping it simple. But you do have till Saturday. So if anyone wants to, play with this over the next couple of days, try to do something simple and direct that you like, and then maybe try another version where you push the pedal, the choice is yours. So that's concept-based, as an art director, the kind of thing we'd need to manage. I want to put this aside, though, and come right back to the handout here. So yes, one could do all this on one page. There's no doubt about it. You don't have to get all complex. So this is what I'd like to suggest about today. Everyone in here as an individual should know how hard yesterday struck you or how easy. So you have a rough estimate about where you stand now. You could choose, if you like, to use any of these quotes during today's demonstration, if you like, right? And if it goes well, all you have to do is continue it, improve it, and find some way to make it your absolute best before the due date. So basically, I'm saying it is okay to start your final right now, right? You'd have to make the choice, though, which of these you want to do. I guess another strategy, and I do want to move forward kind of quickly, would be maybe choose the shortest one in class, and if that proves too easy for you, afterwards, you get busy on something more challenging, right? Does anybody have any questions for me so far? Really, your questions have been great. Most of the time when one of you asks a question, 6 of you have already been thinking it, and they're all glad somebody asked. Yeah, Andy?
That easy one, the Mahatma Gandhi quote, peace is its own reward. Instead of color, like you chose a color yesterday as the background.
Yes.
Instead of color, I'm seeing like the peace logo. Is that possible to draw from the?
Absolutely. You could definitely do that. I have to say, again, remember, this is an intro class, and I tend to be a little bit generous with grading. But at the same time, I like to talk to you about what I would say if we were an agency and you're actually going to produce that for a client, right?
It's just a thought, by the way. I don't know I don't know how to do it yet.
You know what? It's actually easier than you think. And if all goes well today, I will show people how to bring in a photograph, which is all you'd need because, well, we'll get there. But I just want to say something conceptually. When there's backgrounds behind text, the trick is that they can't compete. Generally, the text wins. Whatever's in the front has to win. So if the background's really complicated, it will almost always ruin what's in front of it. So a quiet peace sign might work. And what do I mean by quiet? Not white peace sign on a black background, because that's stark, high contrast. It's going to compete with whatever's in front of it. But if it was, say, like yellow peace sign on an orange background, the two colors are so close, they might serve as a quiet background so I could actually read the text. So that's my only thing I'd like to say. If anyone wants to use background imagery, make sure that they're not competing with the actual text. It should be quiet. If you want to bring in imagery just as another element and there's no text in front of it, small images, you could definitely do that too. And with a little bit of luck, I'm going to get to that today. All right, I want to get back to the handout in a minute, but I want to say one more thing. What about tomorrow and Thursday? So tomorrow I'd like to treat as an assisted lab, right? And I only did that once before. I did it for the midterm. And the idea is people could come with whatever they're working on to our Zoom environment, and I'll be quiet if everyone's busy. If anyone asks a good question, everyone could listen in for the answer. If I have any insights that I care to add, I'll add them tomorrow. But the main goal tomorrow is not focused on new material. It's giving people a chance to have an environment with me for at least the one day to help with the final project. That's tomorrow. Thursday is an entirely different topic that's not going to come with homework or anything. It's just a different topic. Last day, when I think a lot of you are going to want to see a little bit more programming Thursday, and that's it. So everybody clear about what we're doing today, tomorrow, and the next day? All right, we're going to sink our teeth in today, tomorrow's assisted lab, and then a new topic as the grand finale on Thursday. All right, so one thing that I'm going to do today is I'm not going to use any of these because I don't want anybody to even consider copying what I'm doing, because if you did and it all worked, I'd probably accepted it if you did it with these quotes. But I am hoping for you to find some kind of original element to bring to the table. Let's move on. I want to take a look at this. Now I'm going to ask you to do something that I rarely do, right? I want you to look at this stuff on the handout as I talk it up before we actually try any of it. So the first step after you've chosen your quote is to choose how the words will be grouped or separated. So that's that whole issue of the text block. Basically, I'm saying design how they'll look together, right? But also all of those words, right? You know, again, especially for the shorter quotes. So you're designing it. In other words, you make them believe it's a poster, right? So then you're going to go to each separate text block and make graphic symbols. Once that thing's laid out and it looks like a poster, each word that's supposed to move independently has to be a graphic symbol. If there's any groups of words, you know, is the, you know, then make that a graphic symbol. But any unit that's supposed to move is going to be made into a graphic symbol. After that, and I'm just proving to you that this is going to work, right? After that, you're going to take all those blocks, because they're all symbols now, and you're going to use the modify menu to get them on their own layers, because you can't animate them unless they're on separate layers. You may remember that yesterday, once we had the layers, I asked everyone to make them all 120 frames long. We used F5. We just went out to frame 120 and tapped F5, you know, and that gave us a 5-second span for the entire animation. And we could always add or take away, but it seemed to be a pretty feasible number yesterday. These are going to be harder to understand just talking about, but I want to point something out just in the way of logic. Sorry. I know it's a little abstract, but I'd like you to just hear me out. What if a student did this? It was like, peace is its own reward, Mahatma Gandhi. No sliding, no fading, no color changing, but the words did come in time. That is an animation, right? It might pass even, probably. And if the typography was beautiful and the color was beautiful, it might do better than passing, get in the 70s, because it did work with time, which has been a big issue this semester, and layout, which has also been a big issue this semester. If they just did some tweening, then they're talking about a serious grade. We're getting into the B's and possibly the A's, right? So what I want to say about this idea, this Roman numeral 6 here, is related to that. Yesterday, after we got the whole timeline to be 120 frames, and say we had like 5 layers, I went to each word and I dragged it over 20 frames. So the first word was fine in frame 1, but the second word was dragged over 20 frames. Then the third phrase was dragged over another 20 frames. Basically, it created delays. So the first word showed up, and then you waited nearly a second, the second word showed up, because we're going by 20 frames, nearly a second, then the third word. So in a sense, time's already involved. That's what I mean by this. And then after that, one could get busy with the tweening. So I may come back to this later, but I just wanted to point out that these steps will help quite a bit. I'd like to look at this at the end, but I often forget, so I'm just going to say a couple quick words right now about it. I really want the GIF. Only use the SWIFT if you have to, right? It's too many words for a handout. Concentrate on the GIF, right? Lorenzo and I made a special deal because his computer's whacking out on him, right? And I'll be open if anyone else needs a hand. These are all the expected steps. You're just going to send me the GIF or the SWIFT. Please be sure to test your own animation before you send them to me. And you're going to drop them in the same Google Drive we've been using. And that's it. All right, I'm going to get started now, right? And one thing I usually do is I prepare a little quote for me to use for the demo. I spent my last half hour just getting into Zoom today. Rawr. At least I got in. So I'm just going to make something up. All right. All right, I'm going to make mine very, very short. I'm just going to write, peace is cool, right, by somebody or other. You know, okay, so here we go. All right, let's get started. Could everybody join me by opening up Animate? And File Menu, New. And I'm sticking with the same numbers this semester, 640 by 480, 24 frame rate, just plain old 24, and the ActionScript 3 platform type, and click Create. All right, before we get busy with the type, I'm gonna do like a 5-minute demo of the concepts that we care about, right? So, can everybody get me a rectangle and put it in the bottom left? Oops. Sorry, get a rectangle and choose colors first. I'm going to go just with the fill. I'm going to make this a very fast demo and put it in the bottom left. Just like it said in the handout, every piece of art has to be made into a symbol before you start animating. Sometimes I'll draw all the art and then go one by one by one, make each one a symbol. Right now, I'm just going to use this one. So please select that shape. That's our artwork. It could be a word, a phrase, a drawing. The rules are the same. Select it. Remember, if you do have a stroke, you have to double click it. Then you control click the object on stage and say convert to symbol. And give it a name. Graphic type, give it a name, click OK. It should definitely be in your library at that point. All right. Now, again, I want to repeat that if there were 3 or 4 objects, I'd go to the next one and the next one and the next one. I'd just get them all out of the way, right? Now, once your symbols are made, you could go to their layers and turn on the classic tweening. I'm going to do this with one layer, but the logic would be the same if there were multiple layers. So, let's go to layer 1, go to the keyframe, the black keyframe, and control click to ask for the tween. We're only using this one, classic tween. Again, if you had 5 layers, each with a symbol on it, you'd go to each one to tell them all to classic tween. The step that I recommend next would be to extend the timeline with a fair estimate of how long this thing should take, right? Tomorrow, you may have questions about making them longer or shorter or anything like that, and I'd be glad to answer them. Right now, let's go with 120 frames just to warm up. You know what, actually, this is going to be short. So let's just go out to frame 50. You go to frame 50, and just to extend stuff, it's all about F5. F5 means give me time. F6 means copy the last keyframe, and I don't need a copy here. About making it move, all we're going to do right now is this. We're going to have it bounce off the ceiling and then come to the right corner. So what I'd like for you to do is drag your playhead back to the middle, you know, just eyeballing it. And then simply drag the object to the ceiling. Because you're doing this in a tween, it does a really wonderful thing. It created the keyframe for you. To finish it, you just bring it to the right, to the end of your sequence, and then drag it to the right. you should be able to rewind it and play it. Now, every time you do this, it should be getting a little bit easier. Would anyone like to redo those steps? I really don't mind. You know, you could just, and I'll do it. All right, I want to just mention the properties for a minute. So we did scale, we made stuff real big. We did rotation, right, which makes things very exciting. Text is a little finicky about rotation because it's very uncomfortable to see words rotating. But one could. Scale, size, rotation, tint for color changes, alpha for transparency. I want to quickly go over a few of those things, right? Let's start with some alpha, right? Could you bring the playhead back to the beginning? Now, we're going to want to see effects right here. And you're not going to see them, color effects, unless you click it. We discovered yesterday that there's a little wiggle room on that topic, but this is the most reliable way. Bring the playhead over a keyframe and then click the artwork once, not twice. Then you come over here and you change the effect to alpha. I just want to mention though, that if you did click the artwork twice, you're not in your movie anymore. You see how my timeline looks wrong? You just went into symbol editing mode. And if you accidentally click something twice, look up in the top left, you'll see the name of your symbol. So just go back and click on scene 1. So again, you just bring the playhead to the keyframe and click the object only once. Let's go to alpha on the right side. Alpha could be set anywhere along the way. And by the way, Andy, if there was a peace sign behind this, I'd be seeing it right through my transparent object. So alpha is cool. It's just cool, right? So I'm going to set this down to 0. I'd like you to play that animation. So it makes a very subtle beginning. I kind of like it. All right. What I'd like to do next is go to the next keyframe. So that's the black dot. And I'd like you to click that object and let's just scale and rotate it. To do scale and rotation, we use this tool up here, the free transform tool. Or you could just tap Q on your keyboard to find it, right? And this one's easy, right? You just scale the way you like. You could rotate as much as you feel like. And to see what that actually did, rewind. I want to top off this mini demo with a little tint. I want to say something to you. When we were doing frame by frame, we were just applying colors by hand. You know, selecting objects using the fill box. But symbols don't let you do that. So symbols don't see it as changing the color completely. It sees it as tinting, like you put on sunglasses. Here's my pale blue sunglasses. Here's my dark blue sunglasses. Here's my way dark sunglasses. I still see the world, but they're tinted, right? So here's the way you do it. Go over a keyframe, and I'm suggesting the last one. Click the artwork once, and it's color effects again. Instead of alpha, use tint. This chip lets you choose the color you'd like to tint to, whatever color you like. And the slider, the top one, tells you how much. My original color was green. Green and orange makes a weird mix. So I'll eventually get a kind of ochre color. But if I want to completely change, just go up to 100% and play that animation. You know, so I was reading reviews by students who are taking classes online and to see what they said, you know, what they like, not my class, just in random, as it turned out. And one student said, well, there's no real chance to ask questions. And that just haunted me. Because I know when I'm feeling cheap, I ask a question, like I'll ask for questions like this. Anyone have a question? No? Let's move on. That's the sign of a teacher who's nervous. They're afraid they're not going to get any questions. No, bye. I really mean it. You could ask questions. Some of you make a habit of it. Was that fairly easy? That demo? It was? because you're a very poker-faced bunch. I don't know what kind of hand you're holding at all. All right, let's get busy with the real thing then, right? All right, I suggest that you make a folder if you haven't already, and I'm going to be a good example. I'm hiding Animate for a minute, and I'm just going to put a folder on the desktop. Let me just get all this clutter out of the way. All right, I'm making myself a new folder for today. You could call it anything you want because I'm not really asking for folders except in extraordinary circumstances. And I'm going to leave that where I can find it. So this is just to keep it neat, really. It's not essential. I'm going to go back to Animate. I do want to mention, though, that if you're thinking you might be starting your actual final now, why not name it properly? So, in a second here. This should be the name, MMP100-final-first name, last name. MMP100-final-first name, last name. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to go back into Animate and open up a new page. So let's all open up a new page. Let's forget about that little demo. These are the numbers. And save it, even though it's empty. Why not? File menu, save. MMP100 dash final dash first name, last name. I always use Albert Einstein for my demos. .fla. I'm going to put it in my folder that I made, though. And save it. You know, quick word. As an artist, spent years in a hurry. And then later on started to realize what things make me faster by doing it early. If there is a required file name, it's just faster to do it early. All the GIFs will have that name, the videos will have that name, they'll all match. All right, let's get busy. So I'm hoping everyone in here chose a quote. If you didn't, you might want to get a fast look back at the handout and make a choice for today, right? You might want to leave it out where you could find it. I'm not going to be using any of these, so no one's tempted to copy me exactly. All right. So what I'm going to be doing is just peace is very cool. Peace is very cool. I'm going to start with the word peace. So this is the design part of the show, right? Not the motion part. Could you get the type tool? Then I'd like you to simply click and type your first word. You do get to make some kind of choices about it, though. Do you want it to be capital letters or not? Do you want it to be lowercase letters? That's up to you. Once you've typed it out, though, I suggest getting the black arrow. The black arrow will typically select it, but if it doesn't, just click on it once. I'd like to draw your attention to the right side, where the character palette is. So on the right side, you should see this feature called character. Now and then you have to scroll down. Character, that just means letters mostly. And I'm going to ask you to choose a font. So I'm going to get a little closer so people can see what I'm doing. You could highlight the current font and just use your down arrow to zip through fonts. That's an interesting one. You can have different fonts than I have. So I often do this. I'll click the text, click the font, and just use my arrow keys. This works in most Adobe products, not everyone. Some people prefer to start at the top of the menu. I don't, consider these relevant. I'll now and then start at the bottom. Whoops, sorry, I'm going to make everyone dizzy. There are all these odd sections. I've often wondered what they're about. I'm going to start here, though. I'm going to try this one out. Am I? I'm picky. All right. In any case, once you've made a choice about the font, I'm going to make sure to get back where I can see my whole image. So I'm using the zoom menu here. And I think I'm just going to say show frame. That really means show stage. How is everybody? You got a word down? All right, so you chose the font. Now take the size very seriously. I gotta say one thing about all artists working in 2D, right? All artists. Something about people in Photoshop, photographers, illustrators, definitely photographers, by the way. The shape of the stage is everything. So if you're using a camera, it's always the same shape. And you have to love the rectangle. You gotta love it. So if you're not considering how something looks on that stage, you're not designing. So I'm going to switch to the transform tool. Now, if I don't use this tool wisely, I'm going to distort the text. So I recommend that you use the shift key with the transform tool. Hold down shift and I'll make sure it doesn't distort. So I'm considering how this word looks on this particular stage. And I know I'm just going to write piece is very cool, right? So there's that. You know, one thing though that I think we probably should have done before, it's not too late to do it now, is to change the background color. You know, I can't really choose the color of my text without knowing the background. Now, regarding Andy's question, if I was going to do an image in the background, I'd probably do that early, right? So that all my text could look good. But I don't want to interject it now, and I apologize for that. I want to keep our momentum with the basic steps. So for now, what I'm going to do is change the background color. So I'm going to click off, kind of ignore this random green that I got. I'm clicking on the stage so that I could come over here in the properties palette and change the stage color. So this is a sense of feel thing. Some of you guys are going to be just really natural with your own color sense. Pick any color. That'll help us make a better decision about the actual text. So if you want to change your text color now, use either the black arrow or the transform tool because they both select. Click the text and make your choice about that color. Sometimes white is just gorgeous. I'm going to use it. You know, guys, I got to mention, I'm headed for some trouble because this font insists on all this empty space underneath it. So I'm going to be able to get that font sometimes. I may click it by accident. So we'll see what happens. Once you got one word in a reasonable position with a font that you like and a color you like, you're ready for the next word or the next phrase, you know, depending on how you see it. You just zoom back a little bit. So I get the type tool again. My kind of goofy phrase today is just piece is very cool. So I think I'm going to do is very as one word because I don't really want to animate the word is. It feels like a weird, unnecessary pause in the movie. No one cares about words like is. So I'm going to go ahead and make that one block. Got my type tool, and I'm going to click a little extra low because I'm going to move it later. And I'm going to write is very. Now, when I'm ready to deal with the size and the rest of it, I'm going to select it with the black arrow. And again, if that doesn't select, just click it. I do want to scale it though. So I'm going to go back to the tool that I keep on mentioning for scale, the free transform tool. And these are design decisions really. How do I want this to look? You know, I got to tell you something, and this is not your teacher talking right now. This is an artist that you happen to know talking. This is called a descender. The letter P has it, and a bunch of letters have it. It descends underneath. Man, is it a headache for designers, though. Like, really, it's going to make placing the next word a little difficult. I'm going to leave it there and see if it causes me trouble or not. All right, I might want to change the colors. Maybe I'll wait. And I'm going to get the type tool again. I think this needs to be a little bit bigger, though. No, I'm sorry, folks. You know, design is a picky thing. I think this is going to look better. All right. Whenever you're ready, you get the type tool and move forward. So I'm just going to do cool. And I'm going with all caps on this. And I'm switching to the transform tool. And I'm going to make it really big. You see what I mean? Like, if not for this, I might have brought the words up here. But this is going to look bad. So I'm going to have to negotiate. Now, we're going to make a couple decisions before we start the engineering and then make it move, right? One thing I'd like to say is be sure you could see all four sides, because if you're too zoomed in, you're going to make bad decisions, right? Because you're sort of guessing about sizes. I really like the way this version of Animate treats these double arrows. If you click the lower arrow, it goes down by 1%. If you want to speed that up, though, you could hold down Shift and click it, and it goes down 10% at a time. So I've been loving that. However you do it, make sure you can see all sides. If you want to change any color, any font, or any position, you should do it now. I want to say for the record, though, there's an infinite number of possible arrangements that might work. You know, and really, I could spend all day showing you arrangements that might work. You know, and some of them are more daring than others. I don't really want the most important word to be on its side, but it looks cool, you know. So really, I'm keeping it simple today so we can get to motion. Let me just put all that back the way I had it. I think I need more color. This is boring looking. So I clicked on the text, and I'm going to a fill option just to see if I could, you know, come up with something that I like more. All right. The next step that we already saw in the handout was to take what I'm calling the art, or the text blocks, and make each one into a symbol. The thing that I want to be very clear about, sorry for the racket, it just suddenly became 1,000 degrees in this room. Before you turn on tweening, and even before you deal with your layers, make the artwork into symbols. So choose your first word or block. You see, it looks like this is in there, but it's not. It's just the word piece, right? So choose your word and then control click it or right click it. There is a shortcut for this, but I'm not pushing it this semester. F8 would work. So convert to symbol. Name it after the word or the photo or the drawing, and make sure it's a graphic, and click OK. Now, I have a problem, and you might have the same problem. I'm going to try to click is very. Let's see if it lets me do it. It looks like I'm still getting piece. I got to check. Yeah. What am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to drag it out of the way. It annoys me, but that's what I have to do. So I'm going to click the next block. It only happens in certain cases. Try to keep an eye out, though. All right. Convert it to symbol. And you go through all your art. Now, I know some of you got more lines than me, and some have, I doubt you have less. But each separate piece that's going to move independently must be a symbol. All right, I got my symbols, and I'll prove it to you. Here they are in my library, right? I could even preview them. So there is piece, there is very cool, Nice. I got to bring my stuff back into position though. My handout recommends at that point that you get your separate symbols each onto their own layer. You know, frame by frame animation could be done on one layer because you're drawing everything, right? Very tedious, but it's possible to do that with one layer. But none of the tweening would work that way. All the tweening systems really need lots of layers. So here's the way we did it. To get the stuff to separate layers, you have to select all your parts. So I'm using my black arrow, the selection tool, and I'm going to press and drag over all my parts. Make sure you get them all, because we're going to ask the program to put each of these on their own layer. Once they're all selected, I want you to go to the Modify menu. This is on the handout. Modify menu, Timeline, Distribute to Layers. God, I love this feature. There was a day when you had to make all the layers and figure out how to get these things there yourself. There used to be a lot of cut and paste. But right now, Modify, Timeline, Distribute to Layers, it only works if you chose your artwork first. All right. If you just did that particular step, I want you to check out your layers. You notice the way my screen's arranged, you guys can't even see. I can't even see all my layers. I need to work that out. So I'm going to watch what I'm going to do. I'm bringing my mouse down till I find this double arrow looking thing. You see it over here? Because I want to bring my layers up. So you could really, a lot of these have a lot of negotiable room of how you could lay stuff out yourself. But I want to make sure you can see your layers. Before I move forward though, I'm going to zoom back a little.
I have one question.
Give me 1 second and I'm going to do my best to answer it.
Okay.
Yes, Marissa.
So are we supposed to kind of have the layout finalized before we distribute to layers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and only because it's the smartest way. Like I could always go to these early frames and move them around to get a better design. But the truth of it is, again, I have to keep, bowing to Orange Design, the company Orange Design, who showed me the value of thinking backwards. What is the conclusion? Where do you want to get? And then you figure out how to get there. You could apply this to life. It sounds like philosophy, but it definitely works for design. So yes, I consider this the major design step.
Thank you.
But you notice I just did distribute them to layers, and I could still change my mind about where things are. Right.
I got a question,
Okay.
Professor.
Yes, John.
If we were to do scenes, what would you say would be a time limit for each scene?
Well, these are letters are vector graphics, so they're very small file sizes. So I have no concern about file size. Really, anything that's going to feel right, I will accept. So even if you use the largest quote, though, the Eleanor Roosevelt quote, 15 seconds,
okay,
something like that. But I'm wild guessing. Really. Okay. By the way, in the the American audience tends to like things happening fast. So you watch most American movies, there's a lot of imagery in a number of seconds. They even talk about images per second, which is ludicrous. But in other countries, things really take their time. So like, Andy wanted a peace sign, let's say, in the background. What if the peace sign comes out and then zooms up and changes color before the letters even start? That would add some seconds. So about length, I don't really have a minimum or a maximum. It's what feels right. It's a good question, though. So coming back to the layers, I want you to check that your layers came in named, right? And if they did, we want to make use of those names. Also, though, please check there's probably one empty layer. And you should be able to spot that really quickly. All of them have keyframes, but one of them has a hollow keyframe that isn't black. That means it's not even being used. Could you please delete that layer? So you highlight the empty layer. It's got a private trash can, and just click the trash can to throw it out. Just the empty one. Extra stuff is bad. We have to keep it lean. Now, the next thing I want you to do, and this is not on the handout, so I was tempted to squeeze it in there, but it just seemed like too many instructions. I just don't like that my layers look backwards. Cool is very peace. You see that on mine? I know that's going to confuse me later. I want the first actor to be on top, the next actor beneath it, like that. It's just going to keep me on point. So look what I'm doing. I'm going to the piece layer. I highlighted it, and I'm just dragging it to the top of the stack. I'm going to my is very, because that's my next actor. Clicking that layer, and I'm dragging it beneath. So now my layers are in the exact same order as they appear on stage. That is by no means technically required, you know, but it's just one of those things that's just going to confuse a person. You know, it's like saying to somebody, oh, yeah, I want you to copy this portrait backwards. You know, oh. So right now, I want you to organize these just by dragging them up and down. Guys, is it behaving dragging them up and down? No issues with that? So folks, I just want to say, it's about to get substantially deeper, right? So if you have a question about these steps, you probably don't want to delay. You probably want to ask me now. So before we take our symbols, which are on layers, and get busy, I want to mention one little likely error. What happens if you double click any of the artwork? So I want to point something out. If I double click the artwork, that is the same as going to the library and opening it from here. It's going to let you work just on those letters. I want to prove it to you. Here I am on stage, and I'm going to double click this. See, this is a problem for me. I have to keep moving this word away because I want this one. Double click it. Now, the only difference is you could see the other layers if you double click it on stage, but you have to look up here to see what I'm talking about. If it says the name of the symbol, you're in symbol editing mode. I don't see my other layers. I'm only seeing this word. Why? Because this is the only way I could edit features shared by all the keyframes I'm going to get. In other words, I could change the font if I want, or the original color. I probably would recommend the better way to do that would be do it from the library. It's just less confusing. I'm going to show you what I mean. If I go to my library and I double click here, it's the same idea. I just can't see the other layers. Doesn't matter which way you do it, you probably want to avoid it. This is what happens when you double click. But since I bring it up, I would do it if I didn't like the font. Don't like it. So I'll do it from the library, because what it's doing is essentially it's seeing that one in the library as the original. So anytime you double click an object, it's saying, I want to change the original. So I don't think most of you are going to have a need for it. So you don't have to wait. I'm just going to accept this one. All right, folks, that was a little bit much of an interjection. Let's get busy with the steps we need to focus on. On the handout, it says to extend the timeline. Jonathan was just asking, what's a good length if I'm thinking in scenes, you know, whole sentences perhaps, that leave, next sentence, that type of thing. So, you know, he's going to want to add frames probably. But for the kind of length we had yesterday, we used 120 frames and it felt very natural. So I'm going to do the same thing today. All right. That means all of your layers need to be brought out to frame 120. I'm going to use this little scroll bar at the bottom of the timeline till I see 120. So here's 120, this little column. I'm going to go to the piece layer and simply F5. The other two layers are left behind now, so I better go to the next layer, F5. Now the word cool is left behind, so I'm going to go to that last layer in F5. And then just bring your playhead back to the beginning. You know, laptops let you just use your touchpad to scroll back over. So we have a fairly well-engineered set of layers right now. They're the right length. They each have a symbol on it. The main thing to do now would be to turn on the classic tweens. And since I'm treating this like a manufacturing thing, you know, like the conveyor belt, the guy puts on the right wheel, goes down there, the other guy puts on the left wheel, right? And this is often what I do when there's a lot of steps. So I want to turn on classic tweening for all three layers. So go to the topmost keyframe you have. Remember, those are the black dots, the keyframes. And control click it. Create classic tween. That looks good. I'm going to go to the next one. Create classic tween. And go to the last one. Create classic tween. So one thing I've been pushing on this class is that you all made symbols early, because classic tween needs those. And if you'd skip that step, there'd be a variety of problems. All right, I want to talk to you about the simplest kind of animation, and then we're going to upgrade it. I was saying to you earlier that even if your words just appeared, but in time, that would count. So this is all I mean by that. The word piece starts the show. I'm going to leave it in frame 1, but is very should come later. So look what I'm going to do, and you could join me if you like. I'm going to go to that second layer where my second block lives, because piece is fine. I'm going to the second one, and I'm clicking the keyframe once to select it. But after I've clicked it to select it, I'm going to press and drag it over 20 frames. Watch what I'm going to do with the next layer. I'm going to click it and drag it over another 20 frames. This is staggered timing. The first object comes on stage, hangs out for 20 frames. That's almost a second. Then the second word appears. Here it comes. Boom. Second block in this case. Hangs out for 20 frames. Right? And then it says, cool, 20 frames later. It actually works. I want to show you something. You know, guys, can we save again? So most of you gave it the proper name, so all you have to do is Command S. We should be saving every few minutes. I'm going to make a SWIF, and I saved my FLA into a folder, so the SWIF's going to go there too. So while I'm inside of Flash, sorry, Adobe Automate, I'm going to do Command Return. Windows Control Enter. There's my SWIF. It's also in the folder, and let it replay. Right? So it looks like an animation. You've seen this kind of thing before. Piece is very cool. It's just not particularly good. Do you guys all see how this created that sense of timing? So guys, I want to mention that number 20 is very arbitrary. You know, I just do this often, and it kind of works with the way our eyes operate and what our attention expects from kinetic type. But I can imagine cases where I'd go much faster than this. You know, if it was a lot of work, you know, in rap music, for example, to do kinetic type for rap music is perfect. It's like a perfect thing to do. But some of those rappers, they just talk so fast. It's just like, blah, 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 blah. So if you can actually do that, there'd be just a couple frames apart. Word, 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 word. Or, and this is done a lot, by the way, with rap music, you just skip words. You know, you only work with the important words, the most critical words. You just skip words. They're going to hear it anyway, you know, if it was music with the text. So the timing's up to you. Does anybody have any questions? Got stuck on something you'd like a hand with? Because we're going to do some slides now. All right. Let's focus on the word piece. Now, I want to say something that I did yesterday, and I'm not really sure if it was helpful. Yesterday, we chose to hide layers as we went so they wouldn't get confusing. I'm going to see if we want to do that or not today. I'm going to make sure they're all visible, and we'll see what that would feel like. All right. So the word piece is in the correct spot, but the correct spot that it arrives at. And I keep using that term. This is where it's going to arrive. So this is, you did this yesterday, but it should make much deeper sense today. Just join me on faith. All right. Here's the keyframe that has the word piece in it. I want you to find that keyframe and go 20 frames further. Make sure you're on the correct layer and F6 it. So all that means is you have a before frame and an after frame. They're both keyframes, which means you can go to either one and move the object. But the goal in our project, though, is to not move the second one. That's actually the one that completes the design. So Marissa, you see the logic of this, right? This is what I was saying before. So every time you do this, if you make a pair, it's the earlier keyframe that you can change. So if you've got two keyframes for your first word, go to the first one. This is the beginning. This is the end. So you want to go to the beginning. Then drag that word wherever you think it should go. So this is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to have this word come a little bit from the left, but not even off stage. I'm going to have a very subtle slide and fade. So it's going to slide and fade in. Later on, I'm going to set this to 0 alpha. But I want to get all my sides in place. So the first keyframe, I dragged it to the left. The second one we just made, I just left it there. Now, if you rewind your animation, you can see what you've got. I'm just going to hit return. Right? So that's interesting. Just the word piece slides, and the others just appear. I think a better idea is to make the other slide. So you want to find the next keyframe for your next actor, your next text block, your next symbol. And I'm going to go by the same 20 frame interval. There's no rule saying I have to do that. You know, maybe it's piece. It's very cool. So the timing can be different. Oh man, I hate when this happens. Why is Siri listening to us? Siri, stop that. I didn't even touch my phone. That really makes me revert to my paranoid hippie days. The government wants me. Siri works for the government. That's not even funny anymore. All right, stop. Okay, let's go to the next layer. So if you find that initial keyframe, I'm going 20 frames down. You might want to join me, right? And I'm going to F6. So again, I got bookends. The one on the right should be left alone. So you backpedal to the earlier keyframe and ask yourself where those words should come from. So I could, oops, I need to lock my top layer. But look, I'm trying to move this one and I'm getting piece. So I just locked the piece layer. It won't bother me now. All right, so let me get back to Isveri. Isveri's got two keyframes, the first and the second. It's the first one that you get to move. I'm going to bring it a little, have it come from the right. Now, to see how you're doing, could rewind and see what that looks like. All right, so I got 2 layers worth of motion. It's not perfect yet, but it can't be early. And I'm working it out. Using the same logic, I could go to every single layer regardless how many there are, right? And I'm going to do some improvising on this, but first I want to finish out. So I'm going to my last layer here and finding its initial keyframe. So it's not frame 1. This layer is starting on 40. But I have to make the bookend, so to speak. So I'm going 20 frames further down. I have to make sure I'm on the right layer. This is for the word cool in my case. I find the first keyframe. I'm oriented. I know where I am. I go 20 frames further to F6. So now that I've got 2 keyframes, this is before and this is after. Here's before. So I'm going to try something with before. I'm going to move it over a little. Now, I don't think I'm going to like this, but I'm going to get the transform tool and I'm going to rotate it. Now, guys, I want to point something out. I'm doing this just to prove that I can. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to like it. So let's see. I'm just getting a little bit more comfortable. And I'm going to rewind this. You know, I'm going to keep it. Mine really needs those words to fade in. It's feeling a little uncomfortable without them fading in. I'm going to need to do some alpha, right? We're going to do alpha in a moment, but I would like to stop for a minute. I just want to say something about kinetic type. So I've had to do a lot of kinetic type. And, you know, after a while, I realized certain patterns and things that just don't feel right. Words rotating completely always feel wrong. But a word rotating partially can sometimes feel right. But if you're just going to have a word spin, it's just going to irritate the viewer. Words on angles also are rather irritating unless the final design is like that. Turn of the century Russian typography did that a lot. But other than that, it's uncomfortable. Why would diagonal text be uncomfortable? I wanted to see a theoretical share something with you theoretically. You're only comfortable upright and lying down, right? So we're going to consider sitting upright. You're never comfortable like this. This is why in every horror movie, after the woman inevitably went into the basement, while you're sitting there thinking, did you never see a movie? Don't go in the basement. And now she's getting chased by the monster. She falls down. You know, it's like every other movie has this, the horror movie has this scene in it. And right after that, they tilt the camera. Cameramen call it a Dutch angle or a canted angle, right? Because it's so damn uncomfortable. And so now the landscape is crooked. You know, except for everything's like this. Oh no. Thing is, with typography, we don't really want diagonal lines. So I don't know. Rules are made to be broken. You guys ready for some alpha? So that's transparency. Now, the one thing I want you to get, I really would like you to get, you know, forget grades and everything. I just want you to understand this, is when they're tweens, it's always a minimum of 2 keyframes. So to really get to know them is, you could do whatever you want on either one, but I'd never put alpha on the second frame, because that's transparency. That basically means when the word arrives, it would disappear. So don't put alpha on the second frame, you put it on the first. All right, I'd like you to choose a layer you'd like to use some transparency on. I'm using my top one piece. And I want you to go to its first keyframe. The hollow keyframes don't count. I'm talking about its first black keyframe. Then click the artwork. Hang on a second here. I locked that layer and there we go. Click the artwork. By the way, if you locked your layer, unlock it. So you found a keyframe and brought the playhead over there, or you clicked it. But either way, you do have to click the artwork once. So I usually say drag the playhead, click the artwork. All right, here we are in color effects. And I'm going to ask you to try out alpha. So that would be 0 alpha. I could also go just a low alpha so they get a trace of it. And this is what this movie looks like now. So piece faded in. I don't know about you, but that struck me as a little too subtle. So I'm going to lower that alpha all the way down. That's better. So since we're moving forward and this is a lot of review, I want to make a point about color. If you've got 2 keyframes, right, because you tweened an object, the early frame and the later frame, you don't have to do alpha. You might want to do color. So I want to show you what color would look like instead, right? So I'm going to use the next line for a little bit of color. So let's go to your next actor, find its layer, and here's the first keyframe, is vary. Here's the second keyframe when it arrives. If I wanted one of them to be a different color, that choice is really up to you. In this particular case, it's not going to disappear, so there's really no rules about it. Do you want it to start a different color and over a second, in my case, turn white? Or do I want it to start white and as it slides over, become a different color? So you're going to have to choose which keyframe you'd like to change the color, before or after. Bring your playhead over the selected keyframe. And again, click the artwork once. Let me lock this layer. This was Tint. So there's the same steps as when you just did alpha. The only difference is you get to choose which frame you want, the before or the after. Then you get to choose the color that you want. And the amount of the color that you want. So that little bit now is going to start white. And in that short space of 20 frames, mine turns yellow. I'm going to do the last layer, but I want to mention something. On the final project, please be sure you leave room for the author. Right? Yesterday it was Walt Whitman, and that's why I gave you the authors on the handout. Right? Frankly, as a designer, I wish I'd left more room, but I left enough because I'm going to make the author very small. In any case, I'm on my last layer, and this is what I've got, and I want to make some decisions about that big important word, cool. I think I am going to have that alpha in other words, fade in. So I'm going to go to that actor's layer. Here it is. It only has 2 keyframes. Here's the first one. Here's the second one when it arrives. And if I wanted to fade in, the first of the pair gets alpha, low alpha. So here's my pair, and I'm going to the first one. And guess what? It's not showing up where I expect it. And even though there's a little wiggle room apparently, the best way to do it is get to the keyframe and then click the artwork once. All right, same menu. So alpha and tint are very similar. Here's my alpha. I'm setting it very, very low. And I want to save again at this point. And I want to play it. Let me play from the beginning. Yeah, very nice, right? So I've got a little alpha, I've got a little tint, I got a dash of rotation, and a bunch of slides. So one question comes up is like, what if you forgot something? You know what I mean? When you were first designing, remember the first step you did was typography. You just designed where all the words should go, right? And then we worked backwards to create the motion for them to arrive. Almost like words for a poster came from elsewhere and all came to the poster. Sort of the logic of this. But if I did want to add anything, there's nothing to stop me. It's just a little harder. So you could choose to join me now or to watch this, right? So I'm going to make up somebody who supposedly said this, right? So I'm calling this guy Frosty Snowman. And he said, peace is always cool, right? So here we go. If I needed to add something that I had not considered earlier, first thing I need to do is make a layer for it. So I'm going to make believe that this writer's name is Frosty. So I'm just going to call the layer Frosty. Here it is. If the layer's not where you want it, please drag it into position. So this is going to be down here. It's the bottom thing. So I dragged my new layer to the bottom. Next, I'm going to analyze the pattern. So all my actions are taking place in these 20 frame intervals. The word piece starts the show, takes 20 frames to come in. At that same moment, is very shows up and slides in. 20 frames later, cool shows up and slides in. So I would like my new material to start right there because that's been the pattern. So I'm finding my own pattern. Before I could add anything new at this late date, right, I have to put a blank keyframe there. Because if I try to draw now or even put down a word, it's going to go all the way back to the last keyframe, which is in frame 1. It would totally ruin the whole animation. So I'm not only making a layer, I'm choosing the moment where the new character begins. And I insert the blank keyframe this way. Control click in that exact spot or right click. Insert blank keyframe. So there's my blank keyframe on my new layer, and I'm going to get my type tool. I'm going to start with a little dash, and I'm going to write Frosty Snowman. I'm going to drag it into place. And I want to check the font and that kind of thing before I do any animation. Now, I've used 2 fonts and I don't want to use more than that. So I'm going to check out some other stuff. This font, oh, I have to go into the library to check the fonts at this stage. I'm using Tratatello. And what's this one? Super Clarendon. This one's using Super Clarendon. I'm going to keep it. So I just want to say a quick word. Before we animate that, make your design decisions. Where should it be? Oops. What color should it be? I want to ask you guys something. Anyone care to guess if I want it to slide or alpha? What do I have to do to that word first? Anybody? It's a lot of steps, I know.
Double click it?
No, that goes into the editing mode. Like I want to change the font or the color. Make it a symbol. So I want to repeat this concept. Right click it. Exactly. Right click it or control click it. So I want to say something to everybody. You really need to make symbols before you do any animation. We have not really animated anything on this new layer yet. Every piece of artwork must be made into a symbol before you do anything more to it. You can't tween them. You can't alpha. You can't tint. You can't rotate. You can't scale, right? In motion. They have to be symbols first. So I control click it or I right click it and I do convert to symbol. And I'm just going to call it Frosty. So that step is easy. There's Frosty in the library. Uh-oh, wait a second. I wasn't looking and I clicked the wrong thing, so I just caused some serious trouble for myself. Let me just see if I could back out of that. All right, I thought I'd clicked it, but I clicked on the wrong thing. I like Command Z a lot. At this stage, the rules are the same as everything else you've seen, right? It's going to need a bookend to be able to tween. It's only got one frame. All of these have gone in pairs 20 frames apart. So I'm going to stick with that pattern. Here I am. This is first frame. That's what happens to be frame 60. I'm going to go 20 frames over to 80 and F6 it. You know something though? It would be, I could go in multiple orders, but I try not to keep changing my order so I don't confuse you. The way we've been doing it is we made the symbol and then we came to the timeline to turn on the tween. So if you already turn your new text into a symbol, go to the timeline, to that keyframe, control click, and create classic tween. This is the point where I choose where I want to F6. 20 frames downriver, that's how we've been doing it. If I want to be super consistent, I'll do it again. Turn the tween on, the purple bar showed up. I'll go 20 frames down and I F6 it. So now it's that same situation as I had before. I got a pair. What do I want it to do at the beginning? Maybe, oops, gosh, I better lock that layer. So I'm going to lock all the other layers because they're causing me troubles. So here I'm back. Here's the first keyframe for Frosty. Here's the second one. First one, I'm going to move it over and I'm going to also give it some alpha. So I've already clicked it, alpha. At this stage, I've got a completed animation. I'm going to save it and I'm going to publish it. I have 3 or 4 quick things that I'd like to mention. Remember, tomorrow I'm doing an assisted lab, so there'll be plenty of time to ask me questions, right? But I want to say something now. You know, I like looping text, playing over and over again, but only if there's a long enough pause. So if you're doing a very long quote, right, the 120 frames might not be enough. I want you to watch this to see what I mean. Is there really enough time to read it before it plays over? Hang on a second there. Let me give it another try here. Piece is very cool. Frosty Snowman lasts a little bit. And it didn't really last long enough. You know, how many seconds should it last? 4 seconds? Well, that would be, I could round that up to 100 frames. So if I really wanted a longer pause, this is what I would do. I want to find where the end is. Here's the end. If I add more frames to this, to all layers, it'll just be a pause because this is the last activity. This word comes in and then it's just chilling out here for 40 frames, but it's just not enough. I could add more, another 60 maybe. If I wanted to add just, let's say, any random amount of frames, I just go down the timeline and F5 them all. That's just going to create a longer pause at the end. So it'll look better when it loops. That was nice. I'm not requiring that. But the basic idea is the playhead will continue to move even after the last actor arrives. And that creates a pause before it loops again. Now, I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to go over 2 quick things Maybe I'll save exporting again for tomorrow. I think most of you got pretty good at it already. But what if I wanted the background to change color as the animation played? Or what if I wanted a photo, right? I'm going to do the background color thing first. If you want to join me, this isn't very difficult, but it actually has a lot of impact. So if you want to try it out, you could always throw out the layer if you don't like it, right? So let's try it out. Okay, guys, I'd very much like you to join me on this. Now, the background color you chose, right, will not change because it doesn't have a layer. So if I want a changing background, I have to make a layer and put a big rectangle on it. So here we go. If you're going to join me, go to your layers and add a new one with the new layer button. Go back to frame 1. Now, I'd like you to rename your layer. I'm calling mine BG for background, and I'm dragging it to the bottom. So let me clarify what I just said. I want a new layer, drag to the bottom, called BG, or background. Be sure you're back in frame 1, because this background is going to start right away, back in frame 1. So here I am. All right. Get your rectangle tool and pick a color that you'd like to use. You could even use the same color you had before by clicking this, coming over here, and clicking it. But that would be a little confusing, so I'm going to use a brand new color. Now, you want to cover that entire stage with that box. So now you got a keyframe down there. And what's in it is a rectangle. To take this further, I'm going to follow the same basic concepts. I'm going to make it a symbol. I'm going to turn on classic tweening, right? And then I'm going to get busy down the timeline. But the early steps are pretty much always the same. Make it a symbol and turn on the tween. So I'm going to get my black arrow and select that brand new object. I'm going to make it a symbol now. Control click, convert to symbol. I'm going to call it BG here also for background. Did you make yours a symbol? Hope so. All right. Once it's made into a symbol, you go to the timeline and turn on the tween. So you always go to that first keyframe where the artwork lives, like we did on each of these, and say, create classic tween. Now this is where it gets fun. Anywhere I go on this layer, I could F6 to make a copy and tint the background. Layer F6, make a copy, tint the background. I've made whole disco looking rooms by making the F6s very close to each other so the keyframes just keep changing color. Boo, 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 boo. You know, like a nightclub. That's a bit much for peace, so I'm not going to do that many. I want to show you what the steps would be. This is really cool and very simple. So if I drag my playhead over now, I could see the word pieces come in, there's a little bit of action. I want you to choose a random spot where you'd like this whole background to change color. So I'm using the playhead as a reference, but when I'm ready, I go to the backgrounds layer, click in that very moment, and F6 to copy the artwork. All I'm going to do is tint now. I could F6 anywhere along this purple line to do this, but I just chose this spot. To get tint, you always click the artwork once, choose tint. I'm going to do this again, but I'm going to choose a different color to make my point. So now it goes, whoa, piece is it turns in kind of tangerine looking, then, you know, pinker. If you want it to change again, just go further down the timeline and figure out where you'd like that next change to happen. It's personal choice, but you do have to F6 again once you find that spot, F6. Every time you F6 to create the key moment, the keyframe, and then you click the art once. And if you want to choose a different tint or go back to an old tint, it's sort of up to you. I could keep going if I wanted, or I could replay it to see if I like it. I'm going to keep going. So I click a little further down, I F6 again, click the artwork. I mean, you know, if you keep getting the wrong stuff, you could lock your layers. This layer's not locked, so I'm going to click it. And I'm going to pick some kind of color. Right now, I'm going to leave that alone for a bit and just show you what it looks like. Don't like landing on the green, so I am going to change it one more time. The bottom layer controlling all of this. Let's see, this frosty come in right there. So I think just, yeah, I think just around that same time, I'm going to have it changed to another color. So I find the moment, I F6 it. That allows me to click the artwork and make a change. I'm shopping for colors. I like it. I'd like you to save whatever you've got, even if this is just a trial run. No one should feel like they have to do it today. This would be a perfect day just to warm up, unless it's going great. You know, again, these will be graded, including originality, but you can hardly help it. You know, you're going to choose your own fonts. Just make sure you like them. You know, choose your own colors. Make sure you like them. Your design's going to be a little different. Some of yours is going to be wildly different. So Andy, you asked me earlier about photos. I'm going to do a demo of that. And the only issue is I didn't create assets. Remember in the early part of this semester, we needed assets all the time, back in the Photoshop part of the show, for example. If you have a JPEG lying around, I doubt you have a picture of Mahatma Gandhi, or in my case, a snowman or whatever. You could use any photo for this demonstration. So give me a moment. I'm going to see what photos I have. And the good news is there's no images folder to worry about. A neat professional would put the photos in that folder just for convenience, just in case. But the way Adobe Animate sees it, once you bring it into the file, it lives there. So it doesn't really matter where your photo is. But I'm going to go find a photo. So give me a moment for this demonstration. I always have plenty around. So let me just move stuff over. That would be ridiculous. I think I might use it anyway.
What's going on there?
This is me.
I can see. Happy Halloween.
Exactly, as my wife. All right, I'm going to use it. So just so I don't get lost, I'm going to actually make a copy and put it in my folder. I'm holding down Option and just dragging it over my folder there. So there it is. Again, guys, if you have a photo anywhere, you don't really have to move it. So about using photos, remember, this is not a requirement, right? First step is import it to the library. So what you're going to do is go to the File menu, Import, and choose Import to Library. So it's very similar to Adobe Premiere Pro. File menu, Import, Import to Library.
Not to stage?
No, and I want to tell you why. I often bring in photos to have them at the ready, but they're not ready to go on stage yet. Like, for example, we didn't make a layer for it. So if you just made a layer, you might get lucky with import to stage. But if you'd accidentally clicked on the wrong keyframe, it would go to the wrong keyframe. So I find that a slightly sloppy method. It's a little neater to bring it into the library. So you could find a photo anywhere in your computer right now, and that's fine. Notice I didn't check sizes or anything, so I'm doing the short version for the moment. And I did File menu, Import, Import to Library, found my photo, and I'm clicking Open. Showed up in the library, there it is. Now, by the way, if you did want to use it for a background, and since you all know how to use Photoshop, this is one of the reasons why I taught people Photoshop, you would need to remember the size of your stage before you got busy. So I want you to remember though, we use 640 wide by 480 tall.
Gotta
So if
resize.
I would go to Photoshop first, prepare this image, right, at the exact size of the stage. That would be the best way to do it. Sometimes people make it extra big because they want it to start huge and then scale down to the size of the stage. But I think, you know, neat and easy to understand would be crop it in Photoshop. I recommend making a JPEG too. PSDs would work, but they work in a special way that's rather complex. So I would find your photo, size it, make a JPEG. All right, let me cancel out of here. I just wanted to mention that. All right, so at this stage, you do need a layer for that photo. So you'd make a new layer. You could put it wherever you want, not under the background though, because remember the background's gonna hide it. It's like a rug on the floor. So I put it right above the background. And I'm gonna call it photo. And believe it or not, if you want it to start right away, you already have a keyframe. So I'm gonna show two versions of it. Find your keyframe. Unless you want it to start later, then you choose a spot and insert a blank keyframe. See, you have a default blank keyframe in frame 1. Everything goes to frame 1 unless you make one of your own. So I'm gonna use this one, frame 1. I'm on the correct layer. Gotta be very careful about that. Click that keyframe to be sure I know where I'm going. Simply drag it out and drop it. Now this is huge, right? So I want to show you what we're going to get. And since it's so big, it's hiding the colorful background that I just made. You know, it is visually kind of interesting, but I have some choices because the image is so big. I could select it, get the transform tool, scale it down. You know, miraculously, it happens to be the same shape, which is pretty interesting. But if I made it even smaller, I could probably try other cool things with it. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Now it's so small, it won't hide my background. It's goofy, you know, because it wasn't thought out, it's random. So I just want to make my simplest point. If you're going to work with a photo, either size it to fill the screen, unless you just want it to be an element. And I want to show you what I mean by that. I'm going to take this out, right? I still have the layer there. So let's say I'm playing it and I'm thinking I want a photo somewhere. If I wanted a little picture of a snowman over here or a peace sign or Mahatma Gandhi, right? I would figure out how big I needed it to be. And I'd also figure out where it should show up, or I should say when. Maybe it shows up last. So there's the name of the writer. If I wanted it to show up later, I just go a little further, go to that layer, remember we made a layer, and insert my own keyframe. See, if you insert your own keyframe, you could always click it before you drag the image out. Otherwise, it goes back to frame 1. So again, if you'd like to choose a moment for photos, maybe you want multiple photos. You know, a lot of you guys use multiple text fields for your videos, and it looked great. You know, people kept saying different things about Guatemala along the way. It was unexpected, and it just looked great, right? You could do that with photos if you want. But in any case, I'm going to put mine here, so I have to make a blank keyframe for it. Otherwise, it's going to go right back to the beginning. I drag it out. I'm going to scale this just to make my point, because this was an unprepared image, which I never do. I always prepare them in Photoshop first. I'm going to move something here. I'm moving the words is very. See how that looks. So that photo didn't tween, right? It's just showing up. But I do want to add, it follows the same rules as everything else. So if you do want to tween it, make it a symbol, right? Turn on the classic tween and do what you want with it. Just to feel complete, I'm going to do that. Any object you want to tween follows those exact same steps. Drawings, photos, words. So I'm going to click it. I'm going to make it into a symbol. Right click, control click. I'm going to call it photo, or I'm going to call it Halloween because maybe I'm going to want more photos. Suddenly at a loss how to spell Halloween. That's going to have to do. So it's a symbol now. I go to the timeline to turn on the classic tween. You see how repetitive it is. Go down to the timeline. Create classic tween. So there you could see the purple line. I've got to deal with my keyframe issue, you know. Do I want to do one of these simple 2 keyframe things, the bookends? So let's see, there's same 75. I'm going to have it fade in over 15 frames. So I'm going just 15 frames down. And I F6 every time I want to copy the artwork. I know that it's a lot of thought. I know you're all going to do, some of you guys are nervous, and I know you're going to do much better than you think you're going to do. Because I've been teaching this at BMCC for several years. And really almost everyone succeeds. They're usually low, the bottom bar is usually like a C with a handful of A's that people, you know, caught a fire. So again, if I wanted it to fade in or slide in or whatever, I'd go to the earlier of the 2 keyframes. And maybe it'll start over here and it will alpha. So it's going to do fade in as it arrives, like that. In fact, I'm going to have it alpha completely out over here. And this is what I've got. I'm saving, by the way. So I want to say a few things about this. I wouldn't hand this in what I have, right? Because it's arbitrary. You know, I've got colors that have very little to do with anything. Blue is very peaceful. If I wanted a changing background, maybe I would have gone with all different blues. I don't know. If I was going to use photos, I'd make sure they were super relevant. You know, I wouldn't force them in there. It's really like a feeling. You know, if the feeling comes across, you know, there's some bands out there that could barely play their instruments, but they feel them. There was a band I used to love called the Velvet Underground. They could play a total of 5 chords. It's like all their music's the same 5 chords, different order, different speeds, different words. They just had heart, made them very famous. One of Andy Warhol's favorite bands. Right? So this feels arbitrary. Things I'd change is this doesn't feel right with the position of his very, if that photo is going to be there, maybe a little closer. Color's a little arbitrary, but it would score a decent grade. It would. It'd be easy to upgrade it by just being more thoughtful about the decisions. All right. Oh, in my last 5 minutes, and I will stick around a little bit, of course, after class, but I just want to say about exporting. I only want your export file, right? And I've been calling that the output file, right? So this is the artist file, sometimes called the authoring file, simply called the original, right? The FLA. I don't really want your FLA unless there's a dramatic problem, like I was saying to one person, right? If your computer, is whatever reason, something's just scrambling your text, I'll take the FLA. But I would really like people to go find the fonts and all of that gets sticky. So what I'm hoping is your GIFs work fine. The SWIF is only if you cannot make a GIF for some reason. I want to show you what I mean. I made this folder earlier today, and everything I made is in there. I don't need the JPEG. This is a recover file for the FLA. I don't know why. I'm just going to delete it. This is the actual FLA finished 2 minutes ago. And this is the SWIF I made a minute ago. So one could give me this, but I'd rather get the GIF. So I'm going to add a GIF to this. All right, File menu, Export, Export Animated GIF. I'm definitely making sure this is off. I worked hard on that background. I'm going to come down to where it says looping, and I say like once is okay. If you do want it to keep looping, you choose forever. The only thing is you might not like how quickly it loops, and I want to show you what I mean. So I'm going to save it. And it's offering me the same name, .gif. It's going to the correct folder. Perfect. I'm just going to save it. All right, I want to show you what that looks like. I'm going to open my GIF in a browser. Is the pause long enough? You know, not so bad. But what I'm saying, before it loops, I wish it took a little longer. So, you know, in some cases, it kind of ruins an animation when the grand conclusion just ends on a dime. So I'm going to slow it down. I go to the very end and I just add frames. Do I want a whole second? I want a little bit more than a second, or maybe 2 seconds. I could see those marks up here. I'm going to I'll give it a little over 2 seconds, and I'm going to F5 each layer. Because there's no action going on there, the playhead's just going to move through those new frames, not doing much, before it could possibly loop. Just make sure you do all your layers if you're going to do that. I'm going to save it. And any kind of output file is going to take a little bit longer before it loops. So I'm making the same choices as I did before. So I'm just saving over the original. It's going to say replace. Yes, please replace it. Since I already have it in the browser, 1 second there, I rushed it a little bit. I could just refresh the browser. Long pause, that's good. Then it starts again. That's good. Person's like, I get it, moving on. If not, I'll hang out in a little while. So this is how I've done ads for the internet. I'll make them pause at some length. You know, I want to wrap it up. Again, I will stick around a little bit. I just want to say a couple. Faik, are you okay? That's usually the disaster position.
No, I'm okay.
Listen, man, I know how smart you are by now. Seriously. I mean, really, you participated the whole semester, half the semester without a computer, caught up and excelled. So I got to say, if it's this kind of situation, later on it won't be. Listen, I want to say to everybody, though, my demonstration today satisfies me technically, but it feels a little ugly. And I threw in things just to make points that I hadn't considered early. So if you're going to use a photo, you might want to find them early. You know, how to integrate it. You know, problems with mine is not only that it's irrelevant, but the colors get a lot of attention and they have nothing to do with the rest of it. And any number of reasons, it feels like someone just dropped it in, you know. But again, so the options are yours. All right, I want to get back to my handout before, I know some of you have to leave right away. I understand that if you do. If not, you know, stick around. Let me just take another screenshot. So tomorrow's an assisted lab. So we have more time to talk about the final tomorrow. It's not due till Saturday. You could give it to me anytime between now and then for the same kind of grade. But I'm going to go back to the handout for a minute. I'm hoping that between yesterday and today, that when you go back to our handout, this part, the steps will make sense. These are design steps. This is making them into symbols, getting them on their layers, all about F5 and adding time, you know. So really, I got as specific as I possibly could for a fairly complex project. But it would be wise to look through this and see how much you understand to help you along your way. Anybody have any questions about this project? So what I'm hoping, though, is if you have time today, because I know not everybody does, you have to schedule homework around your own, you know, particulars. But if you do, you could jot down any questions you might have, because tomorrow that's mostly what I'll be devoted to. You know, if there are no questions, I'll probably just review it. You know, what the steps are.
Oh, wait,
Yeah.
did you specify how long it has to be?
Lengthwise, no, John was asking me the same question, and it really just has to feel self-fulfilled.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So like, you know, if the thing is like a 5-word quote and you took 5 minutes for it, so I pass out on my keyboard, that's way too long. On the other hand, if it's a 1-word quote, peace, the person fails anyway, so it doesn't matter how long it was. But, you know, I have to say, like, sometimes people do word, you know what I mean? The timing is so much about feel, you know what I mean? So, you know, it's hard to answer. But, you know, my wild guess is we've been working mostly with 5 seconds, roughly, since we've started. So you have a rough idea what that feels like. If your quote's longer, maybe a little longer, 24 frames a second. You know, so for whatever you're guessing, times 24 was the length of the timeline. It's a good question. Are there any other questions? So folks, listen, if I spooked anybody, most of you looked this way before the midterm, and the midterms were excellent, with an average class grade of about 90. Would people look nervous? You know, really. What was the last one? The video, nobody looked nervous, and truly they were excellent. But as I said, I had a quarter of the class just skip it, which will have impact on grades. So I just want to say that about that last thing. Please have a look at Blackboard, because I did upgrade, you know, update everybody's grades yesterday. Also check your BMCC email if there's anything surprising. I may have written you. I wrote a number of people yesterday, mostly in cases where, wow, this person does everything. How did I not get this? You know, which made me think there was just a mistake made. But we have time to fix those mistakes if you check today. All right, keep your head. I'm on your side if anything went wrong. Any last questions for me? No? Khadija, Emmanuel, Liana, you guys have been very quiet today. No questions down there?
I did get one.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
No, Professor, I'm gonna work on my.
No? All right. Listen, I know you guys get a lot of high grades, so it doesn't surprise me. Maybe, you know, you just like figuring stuff out. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I was reading that when it comes to exporting scenes, they could end up a jumbled mess.
Yeah, so Jonathan, I want to address that question. I gave you a cheap answer before. Now we have a little more time. There's 2 ways to discuss scenes. Adobe Animate has a scene feature. And I used it for many, many years, and then it became distinctly less popular. And I stopped using it. This is what it is. It's like, it's almost like, you know, in the days of the DVDs, which none of us use anymore, you could actually skip through scenes of a movie.
I remember
like,
that.
you could get the scene menu and choose a scene. It worked exactly the same in Animate. So you would only see the timeline for the scene you were working on. And it was really handy because programmers, like myself in that way, I'd make buttons so people could switch scenes themselves. And I treated them like a hybrid between web pages and separate movies. And it was a very exciting way to make websites. It was very popular in the days of Flash. But it would require me teaching you a whole new system that I have doubts about right now. So the question becomes like, why did that writer say they become jumbled? I think it has something to do with whatever chosen output file they use. For example, I've never used the scenes feature with GIFs. So I don't even know if a GIF would allow me to do it. You know, it might just show me the first scene, period. The Swift file, which ruled it, is now a no-no. I'm accepting it this semester, but people are worried about it on the internet because they don't know if you're hackers or not, installing bad stuff into the Swifts. Video files never let you use scenes, not from the beginning. So I think what wound up happening, the population using this program changed. Originally, it was all web designers. And right now, they're the smallest part of the crowd. You know, it's mostly animators. So what they'll do is make their own scenes. You know, like at the end of a bunch of words, have them all fade out to 0 alpha, start the next sentence 100 frames down. You know, let's say the first sentence took 100 frames and they're done. You could start the next sentence on 101. Mm-hmm. And so it would feel like scenes, but it wouldn't use that feature. Okay. So yeah, that's a mouthful. You know, I've gotten to know you by now, and I know that if you want to do it, you will achieve it. But it may take a little bit of sweat.
Okay.
You know, I will show you one thing though, right? Hold your next question. I want to show you something just to satisfy that answer. You see, in my animation here, it ends, but it's all opaque. So if it's a movie and this was the end of a scene, it might fade into something else, or it might fade to black, something like that. And if I wanted all of these to fade to black, I'd probably have a keyframe for the beginning of the fade and a keyframe for the end. So I'm going to do this really quickly. These are some serious speed tricks. So I'm not going to go over the details. It's just the concept I'd like you to share. I'm going to add keyframes straight down this column. So I'm clicking this here, holding down Shift, clicking at the bottom. I know it's hard to see because of the color, but I've got a column here. So when I do F6, I did them at once. I'm going to do the same thing here. Click the top, hold down Shift, come to the bottom. F6. I want each of these to fade out. Unfortunately, I have to do these one at a time. So I click, let me unlock everything. Click the keyframe at the end in this case. I'm going to tell this to alpha 0. I go to the next one. Click it. Alpha 0. Alpha 0. So this is the tail end of the movie, right? I'm having everything fade out. Alpha 0. Photo. Oops. Alpha 0. And do I want the background to fade out? I think I'm going to leave the background. So here's the end of the movie. If I wanted to start something new, all I need is blank keyframes over here. Okay. Insert blank keyframe. I could do it one at a time, but you know, we're running out of time, so I'm speeding it up. The next stuff could start here. Okay. You see what I'm saying, right? Yeah. So it is scenes in terms of conversational, right? It's just not using the scenes feature. Just to conclude that particular topic, I have been very interested in the current state of that feature. You know, it was very fashionable because it really did all kinds of handy things. Then it went out of fashion for whatever reason. But it's possible that it's become useful again. It's really hard to track. This program goes through a lot. Mm-hmm. You know, that might have made it easier. I haven't even used this feature in years. I wonder if it's still here. Suddenly coming back to me. Window menu scene. Where is that? Wait a second.
Yep, on the top left.
I got all this stuff you guys can't see, I think, hiding out there. Top left, you said. There it is. So, you know, I could click and make a new scene this way. Now I'm on the new scene. Here's the old scene. That would be so much easier, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know something? Let's just see something. I have an idea how we could learn something together. I'm on scene 2. Sorry, I'm gonna make it a symbol. So I'm zipping through this. I realize this is just to see if it would even work. Sorry, hang on a second there. This is interesting. Let's see what happens in a Swift. All right, works as a Swift. I'm going to try it as a GIF. I'm going to just give it a different name so I can keep the other one. All right, let's see if that works. This will be interesting. I've been wanting to do this anyway, so I'm also very motivated. Oh, so the GIF just publishes the current scene. So, I guess if you wanted to use that method, Jonathan, we have to do one more experiment, though, just to be thorough. Here's the video. Does it even mention scenes? Oh, look, as a video, you get to choose. I'm going to do an entire movie. That's new. I want to get to today's folder. It's already in it. That's good. Everything else looks fine. This will be interesting. Oh yeah, it has to go through this little routine. It's funny how it opens a program that I don't even have to touch. It actually does it all for me. Weird, but cool. The videos go through this one extra step. I'm just going to give it a second because now that we've seen it a few times, I know Belt well enough to wait. All right, so it's in the folder. Should be. There's my MP4. I'm going to open it up in Chrome also. Oops, no, opened up QuickTime. That's fine. Hey, wait a minute. That doesn't look right. Oh, sorry. I'm not being too smart. There we go. Come on, you can do it. Yeah. All right, so we just learned something. Give me a second, guys. Interesting. The scene feature looks pretty easy to use. It just creates new timelines that play in order, but they can only be exported properly as .swift or videos. Or you do it manually and have one very long layer. That was a good question, though. Any other questions for me, fellas?
Sala has one.
Jessica, Sala, Marissa, I didn't mean to leave you out. Just all the guys have their cameras on right now.
No, I'm good. I'm just listening.
Okay.
Same. I have to get ready to go somewhere, so.
Yeah, get going, Marissa. Your hard work, no worries.
Sala has one in chat, Professor.
Oh yeah, Sala, please. Oh, is it in a chat? Sala,
Yep.
usually have a mic handy.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. I have a question. It's in chat. You can.
Oh yeah, is it?
It's
Okay.
like.
All right. Give me just a second. Oh, Sal, I really love the way you think. Is this an emergency? I don't think so. Yes, you definitely can. And it's probably fairly common. If you brought in, if you wanted to go from Animate to Premiere, the way I would suggest doing it is make a video like we just did, like I just did, right? And then when you go to Premiere, import it along with everything else into Premiere. You could build layers on top of it. You could use Premiere's effects or whatever you want. So I hope that answers your question. But yes, in that case, I would output an MP4 because Premiere likes them. and then I would import it into Premiere. Hey, Jeremy, thanks for those movies. They made me laugh, and they were interesting. Sala, you too. They got so excited they both made extra movies they gave me just to look at, which was kind of fun. Sala, did that answer your question though?
Yeah, but also what kind of save, like what program? It's like it's different programs than when we save, then we open it in Primer. It's the same animation when we
Yeah,
save
so
it, something
if
like
you
this.
so let me show you something, and I have a couple of minutes, and I'll be glad to spend them this way. So I just made a movie, right? This MP4, right? And I'm going to open Premiere right now. By the way, it's something I'm very interested in, but I don't want to claim that I've done a lot of it. But I've had to do some for certain presentations that I've made. So I'm not a total stranger to it. I'm going to open Premiere. There's some complex issues that would have to be dealt with. The differences in stage size and that kind of thing. But right now I want to just do a simple example of it. I'm making a new project in Premiere, brand new, right? And I'm just going to call it Mix for right now. And I'm going to browse to today's folder. Premiere is very picky about having a folder. So it's going to add a bunch of stuff in here. So I gave it a name, I gave it a folder, and I'm going to click OK. So I import everything I want here, right? So I'm going to do that. File menu, import, and I'm going to get the MP4 because it can't open the other files. You see how they're all gray? I'm going to import the MP4. There it is. If I wanted to change the in and out, I do the old routine. I'd come up here and, change my in and out. If I wanted to use the whole thing, I would drag it right to the timeline. Truly, I wouldn't even have bothered opening it here. I just would have dragged it over, right? At that point, I could bring in other videos and add a V2. I could bring in photos. I could try, special effects right in the program. I don't really have anything in mind, but I'm going to take a quick look. I'm looking for something worth our time. This is a good one. Hard to use though, so I don't know if I'm making a good decision or not. So this is an effect that I have not modified in any way. Ooh. Pretty interesting. Oh, I got the nasty red line, which means I would have to render it before I could actually export the finished movie. I'd have to hit return. And now it's gave me the happy green line, which means the computer can handle all the complex data I just forced on it, and which will let me export yet a new movie. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Boy,
also, I have another question.
Please, your questions are excellent.
Thank you. I use Illustrator and I love drawing. Wow. And I want to use an animation. Will be easy. Like I should copy and paste or what I should do.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned that while there's still time for me to talk about it, because I'm a heavy duty Illustrator user. And in an earlier life, I was mostly an illustrator. So I'm going to give you a peek at that. I just got to give you a couple of small warnings. They do play together very, very well, but there's many variations that can complicate it. So I can only get you started in a couple of minutes, but I'm going to do that. So I'm opening up Illustrator real quickly. These are very multimedia questions that you have. So this is the right place for it. I hope my computer's okay with me having all three of these programs open at once. It's a strong computer, but I got to throw out a lot of stuff. I've got too much in my hard drive. Let's see. Illustrator's taking its time about opening, and which could be because of all the stuff I have open. No, here we are. All right. So I'm in Illustrator. I'm going to open something up. It's worth noting that I might want to use the same measurements to help me think as I'm using in Animate. It's not necessary because they're both vector programs. I could change sizes, but this helps. Let me just get this where everybody can see it. My computer is suddenly complaining quite a bit. I'm going to close Premiere. Okay. All right, let me get Illustrator out. Hang on a second, it's bugging a little bit. I'm feeling a little suspicious that I punched in the wrong size without looking hard, because this feels wrong to me. Give me just one fast minute. No. Oh, that's right. Okay. So, you know, got to tell you, Sala, that some of the tools don't match the tools in Animate as well, so they're harder to work with. The paintbrush behaves a little different in both programs, but if I keep it simple, I'll definitely do well. And even if not, you'll find out for yourself what's possible and what isn't. So I'm going to just do a couple quick things to make a point. So I'm drawing right, and I'm giving this guy a fill color, and I'm even going to change the stroke weight. Both programs can do that, right? And let's say I wanted to work with this simple thing. To move one piece over is the easiest. Select it, Command C, and go to Animate. Once you're in Animate, make a layer. Either use the first keyframe, unless you want your character to come in later, then insert your own blank keyframe. Now, I want to say something to you, and Andy, relating to something you asked earlier. I could import to Stage or to the library, right? If I'm going to import to Stage, just be sure you know which keyframe you mean. Otherwise, just import it to the library.
I think I'm going to do it your way.
All right, let me do it that way also. File menu, import, import to library.
Yeah.
So you know what, just for comparison's sake, since I chose a keyframe, let's see if it works, because things are always changing. So I'm in today's increasingly complicated, oh, sorry. Guys, I'm sorry, your teacher must be getting tired. I can't import to the library of the Stage. I never saved the Illustrator document, right? It's not even saved. All I did was copy it. I clicked the artwork Command C. So, and this is what I'm recommending to Sala, because I find it even easier. Choose a keyframe and paste. Hang on a second. Let's see what's happening. Command C, choose a keyframe, paste. All right. So all I did was a plain copy in one program, come to the next program, paste. Now, paste as AI, Adobe Illustrator, that's correct. Maintain layers. Well, I didn't select things from layers, but if I did, all the layers would show up, which is great. I'm going to leave these. That's pretty awesome, isn't it, Sala? Weird nose, though. So the other part I want to show you, though, is this. In Animate, this is called a drawing object, right? Which still lets you edit. Look at that. Even though I made it in Illustrator, I can edit it here. So I'm gonna lock that lower layer. So this part I knew was gonna give me trouble. I was just sort of racing along. So this is being very finicky. So sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's more complex. But the good news is I could use it. So the black arrow will let me edit the usual way that we got used to in this class. The white arrow when I have complex situations. But that's the gist of it. So Sal, I just want to say to you as a fellow Illustrator user, the quick fix is highlight what you want, Command C, go into animate and paste it in the right frame. That's the quick road. But there are other elaborate methods that I also like, which involves saving the Illustrator file, head.ai, and importing the Illustrator file. And that could do all kinds of interesting tricks. Lets me work with Illustrator layers right here. It's just too much for one day. But I hope that gave you a start.
Also, if like this, when we draw this, it's one layer, but sometimes we draw some shape have like many layers, and in Illustrator we do in a group, and sometimes it's not in a group. But if I put it in animation, it's the animation will see it as one group, as one base.
That's a really good question, because I have to admit the two programs are made to work together, but they're not always precisely the same. If you make a lot of groups, by the way, for people who haven't heard the term, so if I drew a head with a face on it and ears and a hat and the rest, I might choose to group the head so it moves together as a unit. Think of it as a symbol. It's almost like symbols. What winds up happening if the groups get complicated is sometimes you have to double click it on this side to go into symbol editing mode to work on them. So you see I'm in symbol editing mode. So the only way for you to find those kind of details out is to try all kinds of variations. You're asking the exact right question, Salah. And I've spent many, many hours trying to simplify this topic, but it isn't easy to simplify. So I would start with copy and paste a group, copy and paste one object, try different things and see how they behave.
We can move, like if we need to move the eyes, then it's with the shape, it's one group.
All right, here we are back in Illustrator. I'm going to make a goofy eye, right? Right, so I'm doing this very fast. And I'm going to take this guy and copy him instead. I'm going back to animate. I'm going to take this one out. And I'm going to paste. Same preferences. All right. Now here's the thing. Here he is. If I do frame by frame, I'm probably going to have it easy. So I go down and I F6 it. And I could come in here and you know, move stuff. Sorry, my brain is starting to melt. There we go. So now I've got this. It's very short. Did you see him move his eyes? Right? So frame by frame. The thing is, if you want to tween it, I've got to get these objects on separate layers. I'm going to take these out just so I can show you what I mean by that. So I'm highlighting that keyframe and good old, you tried this today, modify, timeline, distribute to layers. Look what I got. So what I've got here is just the head. What I've got here is the whole eye. And this one here's the pupil. That's the one I'm going to move. This is the one I want to tween. I'm going to make it a symbol. Remember, I'm on this pupil layer that I just quickly made. I made it a symbol. I'm turning on the classic tween. I'm moving over a little bit. Let's ignore this lower layer is distracting, right? And let's say very slowly I want him to move that eye. I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna F6. So here we go. Pretty cool, right? So Sala, I want to try to simplify that answer. If you make a group or you've got an object with several parts, right? Depending on how you make it, you're gonna have to deal with it in different ways. If you like to tween, then the main parts have to be on separate layers. You know, to be honest with you, this one here, if I'm never gonna move it, it could have stayed on the lower layer. But the object that needs to move has to have its own layer. I hope that helps a little. I mean, what you're asking really would take a couple of weeks to just get the hang of these different options available. But all I actually just did was I selected all these parts and copied and pasted. But you know, I didn't really answer your question, I realized, because I didn't group them. So I'm gonna try that one more time. Object menu group, right? This is what you mean, right, Sala?
Yes.
All right, so this is now a proper group. I just grouped it. In this program, one click gets the whole group. That's why people like to group. I'm gonna try it. All right, back to animate. And I'm gonna just throw out these last layers so we're not confused. Make a new one. This one's empty, it's odd, right here. And I made the group, but I didn't copy it. Command C. You know, object menu, edit menu, copy. I'm going back to animate. They all have the same option, right? Edit menu, paste. So this is a plain old paste. Same choices. There's the group. Now, this is going to act the same way here as it did in Illustrator, even though there's a weird glitch going on with his nose. Well, it seems to be, isn't that odd? Every now and then it grows like Pinocchio. This is going to be hard to tween. You know, if I want his eye to move, he's one unit now. So I feel like grouping is probably not going to be too helpful in this situation. What I could do, hopefully, is come here and ungroup it. I don't really see a way to move his parts if they're grouped. You know, if I double click it, I'm in symbol editing mode, I can move things here, but that's gonna act like, you know, a change everywhere. It's not what you want. I'm gonna go back to the scene. What I'm gonna do is attempt to ungroup it. I clicked it. I wanna see, you know, here's what I'd recommend. There's a shortcut, Command B, that only works in this program. It stands for break apart. So I'm gonna do Command B. Now it's not a group anymore. So if I wanted to, I could now move these things to different layers so they can be animated. Sala, my opinion of the this is why I love you guys' questions. They're really on the edge, but they help me reevaluate because something I believe 2 years ago may have changed. So it all depends on what techniques we're using. I'm not in the habit of grouping in Illustrator. I teach it, but since I move around media, I know it can get sticky. But what I do like, if I do bring a group in, I can Command B so that they're separate elements again. And that will give me the freedom to create different layers or to move things around any way that I want. So I hope that gave you a good start. Sal, is that helpful or did I make it worse?
Yes, it's helpful. Yeah, I see. Thank you.
Guys, I have time for one last question if there is one. Andy, your mic's off. Oh, 1 second, Faik. Let me give Andy, he was starting, but he was muted. Andy, hang on a second.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize the time was moving so fast. I just looked, it's after 12:30.
But
have a wonderful afternoon.
Oh, okay.
Tomorrow. Thank you.
Got it, Andy. Tomorrow, if you have a question. Faik, you have a last question for me?
Yeah, I have one question that's just off the topic. Like, actually, I just wanted to ask you about how the VFX works.
After Effects?
No, VFX. VFX.
VFX? I
Yeah.
never heard of it. I don't
Oh.
know what that is. Huh. Have you
Okay.
guys heard of it? Everybody else?
As far as I know, VFX is visual effects, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, is that a program or?
It's usually stuff done in, isn't that usually just little add-ons done in After Effects? I'm
I
not
mean,
sure.
if, you know, if we're using it in conversation and we say, you know, visual effects, well, almost every program has some kind of effects, but the video programs would be the heaviest on it. Adobe Premiere had all kinds of effects in their effects menu, and it does take a little effort to learn how to use them, but they're worth it. I dropped one quick one on today in that demo in Premiere, and it was pretty cool. But obviously, if I was going to use it, I'd want to know where all the choices are. This program's not as much about special effects in that usual sense, animate. So I do think the workflow, you know, Salah had asked me how to bring it into Premiere, which makes sense because those are the two programs we chose. But what's more common would be to take it into After Effects, which is also Adobe. I'm not going to answer questions about After Effects because I'm not an After Effects user. But I got to tell you, it's driving me crazy because I think like one, and where I'm at in my career now, I kind of need it. So that's the next thing on my personal agenda is to learn After Effects. Schools are going to love people, anyone who teaches Animate and After Effects because of their relationship. Usually they can't find anybody because there's slightly different crowds. So I'd like to be that person. And it's so much fun. That much I know. My friends who use it are like, this is the best. It is very common on broadcast TV. So for example, I'm trying to think of, I don't really want to just assume, but many of the TV shows we've heard of uses that workflow. They started in Flash or now in Animate and they move into After Effects, or they start in other similar vector animation program like Toon Boom and move into After Effects. I personally think this program's on the rise just because the last 3 years, I've been using it for a really long time. You know, 15 years, maybe 20, but it's matured like crazy. The last 3 years, it became a new program, much better program. I mean, there are things I'd love to show you, but I'm not an expert on them yet either because they're so new. There's a moving camera feature. That's just crazy. So I could do a whole sword scene and later on say, man, I wish the cameraman came in right on the sword when it poked the enemy. Now I can make a layer that will let me zoom anything after I already drew it. You know, what I'm used to is I'd have to redraw everything in close-up. And I don't have to do that anymore. It's all about mastering this little feature. There's a feature next to it, which is very hard to do. It treats your layers as though in a very different sense of space. So you could start creating really different illusions of space. That's brand new. I don't know anybody who's using it yet, called Parenting. And I've tried that too. But the moving camera is my favorite new feature. And this is all because when web designers got spooked about Adobe Flash, the broadcast people, they didn't care. You know, movies don't give you viruses typically, you know, at least not in the same way. So they kept using it, and all the newer features seem to be mostly for people coming out of video. So these are great, great questions, guys. Some of your questions are about where I also want to go. You know, and there's a sort of a evolution that happens when someone's interested in multimedia. Certain evolution, which is like, well, okay, I need something for photography. I need something for drawing. And then they move into time. I need something for video. I need something for animation. I need something for sound, right? Some people go next, I need 3D. Don't ask me, I know nothing about it. So they might do 3D Studio Max or something like that. And you know, the progression, it just keeps going. Oh, how do I mix them? You know, and that's where it gets really crazy. You know, I'm going to say one last thing before I leave. So many years ago, I developed a friend who was really too young to teach, but he was brilliant, and we wound up on the same faculty. you know, he was really, really brilliant, but also a very dangerous thinker, you know, liked living on the edge. And first time we chose to work together as a web design team. One day we were like, oh, I wish it could do this. And he's like, I think it could do this, but we need this program. I was like, oh, we don't have it. And it's $400. He goes, I'll get it. And within 60 seconds, he would have stolen a program right in front of me. You know, he would work with 8 programs out that he pirated every single one within minutes. He was scary to watch. And then I realized his dad worked for the CIA. And the whole thing started to make sense. Dad was some kind of professional hacker for the CIA who taught his son how to hack like a madman, who happened to be an artist. So he had this weird, I gotta say though, that's extreme multimedia. And, you know, I know the passion that our core group has, even some of the people who already left today. So I think a lot of you are gonna be software jugglers based on your needs. I'm very pleased with how the semester went. Yes.
One more question, like for example, we use that piece is very cool, right? And can we add, as we used piece is very cool, right?
What's cool? Oh, piece is very cool. No, you know, you
yeah.
can't.
No. I'm saying like, can we add a shadow beneath that wording, like?
All right, I'm going to do the fastest version of that I can, and then I have to leave.
Yeah.
You know,
sure.
There's a lot of different ways to make shadows in Adobe Animate, and most of them involve features that would take too long to go over. But here's a trick that might serve the same purpose. So I'm back in Animate, and I'm going to open, where am I?
You're an illustrator.
I'm an illustrator. Oh boy, it is definitely time for me to go. All right, let me just get out of here. And I think I'll go back to this one. And we really did complicate the matter today. So I'm going to get back to, oh, here I am. Give me a second here. All right, this is where I'd rather do it. All right, so say the word piece is supposed to have a shadow. I would like to do this in the library. So I'm going to go to the library and I'm going to find that word and I'm going to double click it. So now I'm only working on that word. Watch this. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to copy that word by option dragging the keyframe into the new layer. Hang on a second, let me do that again because it didn't happen. And now I'm going to lock the upper layer. The lower layer is here. I am going to make it black. So I'm inside symbol editing mode, which should be letting me, sorry, I'm in the wrong place, which should let me edit it. And now the reason I did it in the library is my entire animation will update because this object here is considered the original. So when I go back into my movie, it has the shadow no matter what I do. There are other methods, but that's one, right? So Faik, it's a good question, and it is recorded because I didn't stop recording. So if you want to see it again, you could look at it. We are now way, way over time. So I would ask you guys to hold on any questions till tomorrow because I'm rather late for something else. Okay? Jessica, Lorenzo, Jonathan. Jonathan, I know better than to say goodbye to your computer today. Faik, I'll see you all in the morning.
Have a good one. Thank you.
With pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.